Price of video games is too damn high. At least that's the opinion held by Capcom president Haruhiro Tsujimoto. Dear Lord, I hope I pronounced that correctly because I'd feel bad if I didn't. Basically saying that development costs have risen over the last number of years, but the price of games to purchase hasn't really kept up with that development cost. Now that we're on the generation of PS5 and Xbox Series whatever and whatever's the next Switch coming up, games have kind of slowly risen in price. They seem to be hitting the 70, 75 euro or dollars mark now, which admittedly hits your wallet a little bit harder. And while I do agree that the development cost of games has gone up, so studios got to make their money back, I don't feel that a lot of studios are spending their money smartly. Speaking of doing things smartly, hoo boy, that like and subscribe button. Sure would be nice if you'd press on those, because it really helps me out a bunch, especially if you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment, that also helps. All those things that every other YouTuber tells you about the algorithm, because it does actually make a difference. Here's a cat as a reward. That's you. Yeah, that's you. Ah, God. So speaking of video game budgets, I'm going to take a game as an example here because some of the numbers here kind of astounded me on this game. And that game is the Callisto Protocol. Apparently that game cost $162 million to make. Yeah, the game didn't do so well. The developer expected 5 million units sold and only about 2 million actually got sold. These big budget gambles don't pay off. I mean, the Callisto Protocol looked great. Everyone was super hyped for it. Even with that budget, the game launched in a pretty poor state. On PC anyway. PS5 it ran okay. Even with that amount of money, it still couldn't launch effectively. We've seen a lot of stuff happen like this in the last few years, particularly when a studio has a massive budget and tries to make a huge game just by being like, we throw money at it. Destiny 1 is a great example here. Even some larger games, Cyberpunk 2077, which I don't think I have a budget on that here, but that sold 13 million copies. If you assume that every game sold for $60 on that, that made roughly 780 million back. That's not that, if that game cost 200 million, that's not as big a return as I'd expect on a game of that scale. And as well as the rising development cost of games, the actual development time of games is taking longer. How long ago was it that Xbox revealed the new Fable game that we've seen nothing from? Even one of the higher ups in Xbox Game Studios, Matt Booty, great name by the way, he also acknowledged that games take at least half a decade to develop now. And this seems to apply to a lot of AAA games where it's high budget, high development time, and I don't think it's worth it. My problem comes in with the scope of video games. I think that the desire to hit such a massive scope on games or hit a particular graphical fidelity is way too high a boundary, and I think that really drives up a lot of the budget in games to get to this point where it's like, dude, we want this to be photorealistic. It's gonna be freaking, it's gonna blow your balls off. And then you play the game and it's the Callisto Protocol, and it's kind of disappointing. I think one of the better examples of this is The Last of Us Part 2, a game with some amazing graphical fidelity, but the story kind of falls apart and the game is about 10 hours way too long. So I would happily have sacrificed the graphical fidelity to get a story that would have paid off effectively for that series. Something similar also applies to Red Dead Redemption 2. And again, amazing graphical fidelity, but did you really need to put in time to have the horse balls react correctly to the temperature? Quite frankly, I don't play a game unless the horse balls react. Or another example that I think is kind of interesting in Horizon Forbidden West, they went to the effort of putting, like, you know, bit of hair on Aloy's face, as everyone has a bit of hair on their face. Get over it, you weirdos who got really upset over that. But I don't think that's really worth going into that much graphical fidelity when you're going to spend 20 to 30 hours staring at Aloy's back. It's not really valid to be like, okay, we're going to put this amazing detail into the character where you have to go really close up to see you know, the hair or the freckles on their face or whatever. But also the game is like from back there, so you know, you don't see much. And it's really crazy to me the amount that video game budgets have ballooned out, because apparently God of War 3, when it was first developed, took about $44 million to make. God of War 2018 took about $200 million. It's a crazy level of inflation there on that. I have a note here that just says game cost equals more time per money, and I don't know what that means. Anyway, so we're seeing games kind of rise in regards to the price you have to pay to actually get access to them. Having this model going forward where games are just going to get more and more and more and more and more expensive to develop means that each game that gets developed is going to be a greater risk. We're probably not going to see games get as many sequels. Budgets are going to go up. You're going to have a much smaller return on investment because you might need to put $200 or $300 million into a game, and then the game globally only makes what, 400 or 500 million. So it's not really going to be worth the additional payoff, because if you include marketing and everything like that on top of it, it just doesn't work. This system of bigger budgets, greater graphical fidelity, longer stories that need to just fill more of your time, it's not something that can grow exponentially. These games that take 4 or 5 years to develop, they already cost the same amount as some of the most expensive movies. What's going to happen in a few years when game cost doubles the cost it takes to make a movie? I mean, it's not going to pay off. And personally, I'd love to be able to see like budgetary breakdown of games in terms of how much you pay developers, which you should do, how much you got to pay actors, which you also should do, to how much kickback that the CEO gets, which you shouldn't do, just to see how much a game's budget can balloon out depending on what they're looking to achieve. But if video game budgets keep ballooning like they are, the only games that are going to get sequels are the AAA games that are super successful. There's not going to be like a middling success of like, I think we can crank out a sequel here. It's going to be like either really successful or failure. It's just going to become binary. It's not going to become a middling success. I feel like the only remaining games that are going to be there in the future are just going to be the biggest money makers, the biggest AAA games. We're not like just the same stuff made over again. And I, for one, I just don't want to see the same games made over and over again.